Welcome to Insight into Iceland for May 21st. It was day 12. It's been a lot of days of the Mid-Season Invitational. Let's talk about the first semifinal. We just had Royal Never Give Up play against PSG Talon. Typically, this would have been the second semifinal, but they had to shift the scheduling around because of RNG needing to have some blood testing or something for COVID-related stuff on their travel back, because it seems like they really dropped the ball on the planning. So unfortunately, Damwon don't get the main advantage, or one of the main advantages of finishing first. They did get to pick their semifinals opponent, but that's, it is what it is, and here are the teams playing. So RNG, PSG, coming into this series, I thought RNG might be a little vulnerable. I think there are a lot of parts of their game where they were getting attacked, they were getting set behind early, they weren't playing with the lead as much as you might expect, but some things they're doing very well. And PSG, I think, have showed up to this tournament at a higher level than certainly I expected. And not to speak too much for other people, but I think a lot of people probably didn't expect the level of play that PSG brought out. So I expected a 3-2 series or something very close. And I think we did get a very close series. Some of the games, especially within them, were very back and forth. But there were some clear areas that RNG were a bit superior. There are some things PSG did very well. So let's talk through the way the series actually played out. So game one, we saw Lee Sin for RNG. I believe that was their first pick. They also brought out the Orianna. Cryan playing his control mages had Twisted Fate banned away from him, and if he's not playing TF, or if nobody lets Renekton through, which nobody should ever do right now, he's going on Orianna, Victor, things like that. And we also saw a Braum for Ming, which was pretty interesting. On the PSG side, so the full comp, Lee Sin, Morgana, Orianna, Tristana, Braum, and on the PSG side, Gnar, Udyr, Azir, Kai'Sa, and Leona. The Azir was an interesting part for PSG because not something that is quite as active or as frequent of a playmaker as some of the other things that Maple has been playing. Obviously, you can do things with the Azir ult to make some plays, and they did. PSG really went at RNG in the early game using fast clear speed from Udyr, attacking the mid lane, trying to go after Cryan. They did get first blood on Cryan with a gank. They picked up the first couple of dragons, which is something that I've mentioned in other contexts. PSG did a lot of early dragon prioritization and paired that with some good gold leads. But RNG were fighting back, and they were working the side lanes really hard. They ended up getting the first turret in the top lane after using the Herald in the bot lane for a lot of plates, but not quite being able to finish it off. So they're really taking both side lane turrets. And by the time they managed to knock them both down, they had a pretty sizable gold lead, despite losing those dragons. And with all the rotational play RNG was pulling off, and just the speed that they were pushing the waves out, and the timings of when they were pushing, they were really in control of the map and in control of the game in a lot of different ways. So PSG tried to force some 5v5 scenarios where they could get their Gnar, Azir online, get some engages, but they just couldn't quite get to those timings, and RNG were running them around the map quite a bit. They managed to be first to all the key objectives later in the game when they started to really matter. So the later dragons, denying the soul, controlling the Baron, and RNG eventually, I believe there were 7 dragons taken in this game before, so they went 3-3 before getting the soul, and RNG were on the soul. They controlled the Elder Dragon, and PSG just couldn't fight for any of those. And we'll talk about that a little more in my takeaways later, but this was the game that was the best example of RNG using the side lanes really well. So RNG took that game. PSG move over to the blue side for game 2, and they go with a Nocturne, which had been banned against them in game 1. So PSG drafted Nocturne, Udyr again. In fact, PSG played Udyr in all four games. Spoiler, 4-game series. Nocturne, Udyr, Silas, something with a little more activity and pressure for Maple, and then Tristana, Nautilus. RNG went with the Gnar this time, as well as a Morgana, a Victor, another kind of standard control mage for Cryan, and a Kai'Sa with another Braum. Although I see right now, and I'm going to fix it as we look at it, I spelled it with an N. Braun. Beautiful. I tend to do that I think it's a standard typo for me. So PSG, again, go after Cryan in the mid lane, this time with the Udyr and the Silas. They got control of the lane, not first blood on it, but they did get a TP advantage by forcing Cryan to TP back into the lane, and Maple was able to hold on to his with the prio he had. And then he used that teleport into the bot lane for a big dive, a big 4v2 dive, if I'm remembering it right. They got a really big win off of that dive. PSG played the rest of the game with a lot of pace and were snowballing it and extending their lead and doing, that's what they have been quite good at in this tournament. A couple of team fights went RNG's way. They were fighting really well and bringing it back. with with what the Victor could do, all the disengage in the Victor Braum. Morgana can contribute to that as well. Xiaohu had some good Gnar ults. But PSG ultimately were too far ahead, and they won, the one really big team fight they needed that led into a Baron, and then from there on, it was just too much. So blue side won the first 2 games. PSG tied up 1-1. RNG go back to blue side for game 3. They get another Lee Sin. They keep going on the Morgana. I said, Udyr was played all 4 times for PSG. Morgana was played all 4 times for RNG, and they were both obviously comfortable with that matchup. Back on Orianna for Cryan, and then Kai'Sa Braum. So, the actual bot lane carries, swapping back and forth, but staying pretty consistent on the support choices. PSG went with an Aatrox this time, which was a little unusual. The Udyr, they took the Victor themselves, and a Tristana Nautilus. PSG started this game off very much on the wrong foot. They went for a late invade onto the red buff to try to contest Wei's start, which, attacking Morgana early in her clear I think is fine with the Udyr and all of that, but I don't know if they just weren't thinking about the fact that it's a level 1 Braum on the other side, and Braum with his passive and the stuns you can get off of that is just so strong. So RNG were able to resist that invade pretty easily, and there were some flashes traded both ways, but ultimately, I believe it was Kaiwing who died for the first blood. Gala picked that up, so he's off to the races. PSG tried to compensate with River ganking into the bot lane, early in his clear, trying to recover it, but Xiaohu TP'd to react to that. RNG kind of resisted the gank and then hit back with a dive of their own. It looked like they were going to get a really big win off of that one, and they had good wave setups for that TP to happen. And it turned into a big, long, drawn-out engagement. RNG actually ended up overstaying between the bot lane turrets and gave up 3 kills back. So the kill score was 3-3 at that point, but because of RNG, because of the first blood bonus and because of the way they had set up the waves before all of that played out, and the fact that they were denying CS on the turret during their overstay between the turrets, they were still up in gold by a pretty decent margin after all of that played out. So Xiaohu kept using, like he did with Lee Sin in game 1, he kept abusing his lane, getting plates. RNG got the first turret, and it was just kind of they rolled the game out from there. So this one was over relatively early on, and it just came down to PSG failing to recognize kind of how things would play out in that level 1 and what all the knock-on effects of that, and Xiaohu's strong laning, his advantage there. We go into game 4. PSG's back on blue side. It had been blue side winning every game so far, so it felt kind of good about PSG, but they took a little bit of a different approach. They went back to the Sylas, but they also brought in a Gangplank. So their comp was Gangplank, Udyr, Sylas, Tristana, Rel. The Rel got through this time, and I believe PSG had been banning Rel pretty consistently themselves and denying it from Ming, but they picked it up themselves this time. RNG went back with standard. Gnar, Morgana, Orianna, Kai'Sa, Nautilus. There was a very back and forth early game, little bits of trading here and there. PSG managed to get the first Herald, and they tried to use it on the top lane to kind of snowball through that lane, because Hanabi had been doing some pretty good laning on the early Gangplank, as you often can in the first 2 levels. But they kind of misplayed the use of the Herald. It turned into a more of a drawn-out fight sequence. They didn't, burst out the initial kill on the dive right away. So the snowball that they were trying to set up just didn't come off. And during all of that sequence, PSG had invested really heavily rotationally in making that work, and Gala stayed bot lane for a really long time. His initial push, Hanabi had denied with a Gangplank ult, but Gala was able to keep going after that. He had, several waves worth of time free in the bottom lane. He got really fed early. He got way ahead. There were huge team fights in this game. You go watch this game. If you don't watch the rest of the series, go watch this game. It was really entertaining, a lot of fun. And both teams, I think, playing pretty well. So there's huge fights around dragons, around barons. In the end, RNG managed to get the Infernal Soul. This is another game where I think RNG managed kind of the map and the side lanes better, got approaches earlier, were able to start the objectives really quickly and force PSG to react and respond to that and make some minor mistakes on that. That got punished really hard. But this was still trading back and forth. So RNG managed to get the Infernal Soul, but PSG managed to pick up a Baron, and they were still very much in it. It came down to, RNG being a little bit ahead, having that soul buff, and start setting up on the Elder. Again, they just had the map control, so they could set up on the Elder with a much stronger position, and they just started it and went really fast on it and said, hey, you got to do something because we're working on this Elder. We're knocking its health down really quickly. And PSG contested the Elder. They didn't contest it super cleanly, and they lost it. The positional advantage won RNG the fight. They won the series, and it ended up as a 3-1 scoreline. So I think some of the big takeaways today, I think it's really worth shouting out Doggo, and a lot of people are doing that. That, you know, not to say that he played just a brilliant all-around tournament. I think he was very good in a lot of ways, had the ways he fell short, but as an 18-year-old player who wasn't even on this team during the PCS season and had to come in as an emergency sub for the tournament, as a player who played so aggressively to a bit of a fault, you know, during the series, there were times the classic Tristana, you know, going in with W at a poor time and getting punished for it. But he also had some really big carries in team fights, multi-kills, you know, barely escaping in different scenarios. And just the way he played and the pressure that he was under and the circumstance he was playing under was really great to see. I think he's very much worth celebrating from this tournament. So good on him. Good boy, Doggo. Good boy. And then the other big takeaway from you, as I've already been referring to, is just the value of the tempo that RNG play with. They're always pressing the lanes, synchronizing up their pushes in different lanes, rotating around the map to the right places, and using that to put so much pressure on the objectives. It's not just having setups on those objectives, but especially in that game 1 and then also in the game 4, I think were the two where it was most obvious. They would push these waves out and have vision control, and they would start the objective right away. And PSG, you would see, thought they had, especially in game 1, they would think they had 10, 15 more seconds of RNG kind of being careful with their vision control and making sure all their angles are covered. And then, you know, PSG thought, but we still have enough time to, you know, fix this wave, walk up, make sure we're in the right flank angle, and then, you know, by then, Dragon will be, you know, 2/3 health still, and we'll be able to decide whether to pull the trigger or not. But RNG were just so fast. They would have the waves in that place, and they would just start hitting that objective. And if you didn't approach right away, it would just be too late. And you'd either have to have like a desperation flash steal attempt, or it would just be gone. And then you're either fighting afterwards for nothing, or RNG are just disengaging and leaving. And you could see by game 4, PSG had started to figure this out a little bit more, because now they weren't 10 seconds late, they were 2 seconds late, but it was still not enough. And that's why, like in game 4, River had to flash into the Elder Pit to try to steal, and he didn't time it quite right, and he just got killed and didn't get to try the steal attempt. But that was a symptom of all the pressure that he was under and that the team was under, that they didn't have vision control of this area. They didn't know, they had a hard time estimating how much time do we have before this thing is just gone and we don't even get a chance to contest. And they started to figure that out over the series, but RNG just, with all the pace they generated on the map, all the control they had of the map, made it so difficult for PSG. And this is the kind of thing that I think a lot of pro teams are trying to figure out and catch up to, and that RNG do so well. And we really, really saw it on display today. So that's my take on the semifinals. I think Dem1 and Mad Lions shouldn't see this series as like, oh, RNG were so dominant and it's going to be really, really hard for us to beat them. I think there were areas that RNG were vulnerable. I think PSG had a lot of success attacking Cryin in lane, and playing with high pace out of the jungle and mid. I think when they drafted for that, rather than things like the Azir, it worked out a little better. And I think, you know, as long as you learn the lessons that PSG did without having to lose games for it on the kind of pace that RNG are going to play with, you're going to be in a good position to be able to contest them overall in the game, and win team fights against them and so on. So I think RNG did look quite good today. They don't look unbeatable, but there are certain things that they just do so well, and a lot of fun to watch, especially as an analyst. You know, macro related things rather than just the classic, you know, fight. That's so much fun. It's cool to be excited about a macro team. So, anyways, that's today. Tomorrow is the semifinal, the second semifinal, and then finals on Sunday. Looking forward to watching all of that, and I'll have recaps for each of those as they play out. Thanks for watching.